For those of you who are just entering the Zoom, my picture, Denise Quarles, you see my name and you can hear my voice, but for some reason my video is not working today.
Okay.
Welcome to International Women's Day program, co-sponsored by the Greater Lansing United Nations Association and Zonta International District 15. For several years in March, our two organizations have worked together to present a program to the public and Zonta members and GLUNA members to enhance the understanding of important issues about women. My name is Denise Quarles. I'm the president of the Greater Lansing United Nations Association, which I will refer to during the session as GLUNA. We have a mission to educate our members and the community about the United Nations and to advocate for supporting it. This is accomplished through a variety of activities such as routinely providing UN and UN association news via email communication and conducting programs such as this one, highlighting issues related to the various international days recognized by the UN. I'll now turn it over to Gil Johnson, the Zonta District 15 governor, who will share information about Zonta.
Thank you, Denise. I'd like to thank Pam for making time out of her schedule to come and be part of the conversation. To talk about District 15, I have to talk about Zonta International. So I must share an amazing Zonta story with everyone as an introduction. So in Buffalo, New York, in 1919, a group of incredible women got together who could envision a world where women were equal, where they could lend a voice to women's issues, where they could network, and they envisioned a world where women would live in a world with no fear of violence. They carefully crafted a brand, a logo, a name, and a mission statement that continues to this day. Zonta International today has over 26,000 members in 1,100 clubs in 64 countries, separated in 32 districts. District 15 is one of those 32 districts. We have 32 clubs, over 500 members, and we encompass all of Michigan and Southern Ontario. We are truly an international district. The way we support our Zonta International mission and goals is through our local service. And our local service and support is through education, service, and advocacy. We are proud here in Michigan to have been part of a partnership with Unchained at Last, who advocated for legislation, and we are now in Michigan, one of 13 states that ended child marriage. So that is one of our amazing stories within our district. We have a close relationship with the UN, and Pam is going to tell us about that. And I can just say that our Zonta causes range from a list of important issues that face women in these times. So Pam, I'll turn it over to Pam, or back to Denise probably.
Okay. We are pleased to have with us today Pamela Morgan, who is the chairperson of the Zonta International United Nations Committee. We will have a conversation with her to learn about the important relationship between the NGO, non-governmental organization, and the UN. In her role as chair of the Zonta International's United Nations Committee, Pamela leads teams of representatives in New York, Geneva, Vienna, Paris, Africa, and Bangkok. In her capacity as Zonta International representative to the UN, she serves as co-chair for the NGO CSW, which is Commission on the Status of Women, New York, a prominent coalition of non-governmental organizations that work together to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls globally. Their annual NGO CSW Forum is the largest civil society convening at the United Nations headquarters. As the co-chair of NGO CSW New York, Pamela plays a crucial role in leading and coordinating the organization's efforts to advocate for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Her role is vital in ensuring that the NGO CSW New York continues to be a powerful advocate for gender equality and women's rights on the global stage. Pamela is also the executive director of Women in Media in Newark, New Jersey, a not-for-profit organization which she founded that advocates for and educates the community about issues affecting women globally, using film, video, and new media as its platform. Their flagship event is their annual Women's International Film Festival, where they screen an international array of independent film by and about women. I'll start by asking Pam several questions. She and I and the governor had agreed early on that we would have a conversation with her today instead of your usual presentation. And so the governor and I had prepared some questions. I'll start with, first of all, welcome, Pam. And we're pleased to have the opportunity to learn from you and your extensive experience about the UN and the relationship between the UN and Zonta. So Pam, with the first question, what was Zonta's involvement in supporting the establishment of the United Nations?
Good evening, everyone. And before I start answering the questions, I'd like to thank Gail, the governor, as well as Denise and Samantha for your kind hospitality. It's a pleasure to be here. I love sharing the good news about Zonta International and the work at the UN. And Zonta is as I was saying earlier before we got started, Zonta is a unique organization. The UN was started in 1945, and Zonta came on board in 1946. We've been with them since the beginning, and we have had a rich relationship. What many people don't know is that there have been 4 conferences on women starting in 1975. And Zonta International's first international president, Helvi Sipila, was actually the Secretary General of the conference, the International Conference on Women. So it goes to show you the type of respect that the UN had for Zonta International. Zonta was given roster accreditation consultative status with ECOSOC in 1969. And that is a designation that allows you to participate in conversations on the UN floor and to submit statements. And then in 1996, we were granted general consultative status, which is the highest status that any NGO can have at the United Nations. And out of the hundreds of NGOs that have accreditation with ECOSOC, Zonta is one of few that has general consultative status.
Okay, if you could just give us a little bit of insight about when an issue comes up about women, by what UN agencies is Zonta contacted and invited to meetings?
Excuse me, Zonta is contacted by a host of agencies, and I'll give you just a few examples. During the recent CSW, we had the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. And NGO CSW New York actually hosted over 13,000 women at this convening. And during this convening, the Secretary General hosted a town hall, and Zonta International was asked to be a speaker. In fact, I was the second speaker during that convening. Zonta International is well respected at the UN because we do what few NGOs do. Zonta International supports with our words and deeds, but we also give millions of dollars in financial support to UN agencies. We were one of the first civil society supporters of UNICEF. And whenever UNICEF has a meeting, whether they know we're going to be there or not, they acknowledge the relationship with Zonta International. We also are invited to submit statements. We've submitted statements on CSW revitalization. We annually submit statements on the priority theme, on the Commission on the Status of Women. And within the last few months, we've actually given 3 statements on the role of civil society in CSW revitalization. We have UNICEF that we work with. We also work closely with UNFPA, which is the Population Fund. And then UN Women also calls on us for support.
Okay.
A few examples of issues that we address at various UN locations. In New York, we have been active in the Commission on the Status of Women, the NGO Committee on Aging, the NGO Committee on Migration, and the Committee to Stop Trafficking in Persons. In Geneva, the focus is on human rights and labor. Geneva is the center for the High Commissioner of Human Rights and the Office of Human Rights. Also, the International Labor Organization is in Geneva. So we really focus on those areas. In Vienna, there is a focus on the Crime Commission, climate-induced violence against women, and also on trafficking in persons. Then in Paris, where we have UNESCO, the focus is generally on girls' education. Our Paris UNESCO team in October for the International Day of the Girl Child went to Cote d'Ivoire in Africa and participated in an International Day of the Girl Child event. And Bangkok has recently been asked to be a signatory on a government initiative to use sports as a vehicle to halt violence against women. Then in Nairobi, the focus is on environmental programs. So that's a broad picture of what we actually do at the UN. Denise?
All righty. The next question I was going to ask, you've kind of covered it. I was going to say, what sustainable development goals is the Zonta International focus? Certainly equity, female equity is one of them. You want to name a few others?
Sure. And many people think that SDG 5, gender equality, is the only one that we would have a focal area. But the truth is, all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals are intertwined. So if you look at SDG 1, no poverty, or SDG 2, zero hunger, all of that is going to feed into whether or not you have gender equality, life below water and life on land. Again, peace, justice, and strong institutions leads us into Security Council Resolution 1325 that looks at women in conflict. So if we were to go step by step and look at all 17 SDGs, we would see how they are all interrelated and how all of them impact the lives of women.
You recently came back from the CSW 69 in New York. And do you have a few highlights you'd like to share with us about the meeting?
I certainly do. CSW 69 was it was gratifying in the face of such a large pushback on women's equality. There were thousands of women. There were 13,000 participants, both virtual and in person. And this was the first year that I can recall that there was a great degree of solidarity. Usually there's some type of conflict. The lesbians are angry with the trans, or the people who are the abolitionists, they're angry with people who um, believe in who want to have abortion. Sexual and reproductive health usually brings upon a lot of conflict with it. There is usually conflict with sex workers versus people who don't believe that sex work is valid. So we generally have all of these conflicts brewing underneath the surface. This year, we had no complaints. I experienced just a general mood of solidarity and an acknowledgement that if we don't work together and find ways to work in harmony, the pushback is real, and that we're going to completely lose women's equality.
Were there any declarations or anything that came out of it specifically?
Yes, excuse me. Every 5 years is a review year of the Beijing Platform for Action. And so this was the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So it was a review year. During the review years, we have a political declaration. On the other 4 years out of a 5 year cycle, there are agree conclusions. Now, one of the complaints is that the agree conclusions are not mandatory for implementation. Unlike the Security Council, where every Security Council resolution that is adopted, they implementation is mandatory. With the agreed conclusions and with the political declaration, that is not the case. So we have a political declaration that was pretty surprising that it was adopted on the first Monday of the Monday actually of the second week, because it was adopted unanimously with no conflict from member states. And it was in support of women's equality. It was not, some people criticized it because it did not mention some of the more contentious areas, but I think that the ambassador from Saudi Arabia, who is the bureau chair and the head negotiators, wanted to have a peaceful declaration. And so some things were, they were able to put in some things and not others. But there was a political declaration.
Okay, thank you. I've attended one time, and I intend to go again in the future. I found it to be very interesting, the hundreds of groups, NGOs that come together with different emphasis. You know, they have different issues that they're focused on, and to see them come together in sessions and work together. So thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. There were, I can tell you about some of the sessions that were particularly meaningful to me. We had great sessions on child marriage, on the elimination of child marriage. There were sessions that I thought were really valuable on climate, women in conflict, and how climate and can play a role on what happens to women in conflict. And you don't always equate the two, but there is a relationship there. There were wonderful sessions that focused on women in the MENA region. With all that's happening now in the MENA region, the women came together with a beautiful resolve to accept what has happened and to make lives better for their families. There was a quite amazing session on women involved in sex work. And then, of course, we were all interested in sessions on violence against women and women's leadership. NGOCSW hosted over 750 events, and UN Women and the UN hosted about 200 side events. So my head's still spinning.
Yeah, good. Do you
Yeah,
do you know approximately how many people were in attendance?
about 13,000.
13,000.
That
Okay.
was, yeah, that was, I know that we had well over 12,000 who registered on our platform the last time I looked, which was mid CSW. But at today's meeting with UN Women, they gave us the number of well over 13,000.
Do you know, Pam, how many Zontians attended?
We had quite a contingent of Sanchins. I would think probably around 100.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yes, Sanchins really come out for CSW and they make their voices heard, and it's gratifying. And they come from all over the globe. We had Sanchins from New Zealand, Australia, Africa, Europe, South America, and of course North America. We had Sanchins from 6 continents.
Wonderful. Is there any other information you wish to share with us about the Zonta International and UN relationship?
Yeah, what I want everyone to understand is that the UN is the only vehicle on the globe that examines and safeguards women's and girls globally through its gender mechanisms like CSW, CEDAW, Security Council Resolution 1325, and it's all now at risk. We must do all that we can do to ensure that it survives. The pushback is real. We see it every day. And today I was at a seminar, and Gail, you may have been there too, on the Council of Europe. It was a
Yes.
Zonta seminar on the Council of Europe. And these mechanisms are so important for for women's safety, for women's quality of life, for women's ability to reach their highest potential. And the, if the powers that are now working to dismantle the UN, if they are successful, it is going to have a devastating effect on women globally. So our president, Salah, is strong, and she just recently um, put out a strong statement in support of the UN and pledging Zonta international support for the United Nations. But my heart is a bit heavy right now as I see what's coming down the pike.
Pam, is there something we can do as Zontians and individuals to help support and try to help us pass this kind of troubling time? What can we do as individuals to help support the UN?
I think if we speak to our elected officials in support of the United Nations, I think that could be helpful.
I know the United States has not been paying its committed share of funding for quite some time now, and that's troubling too. Because
The United States, you're right. Not only has it not been paying its allotment, but it has recently withdrawn from some key UN entities, which is also troubling. So we need to be aware that there are some, and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but there are some um, very conservative players who are who seem to be very deliberate in trying to dismantle and trying to get this government to dismantle any progress that it might make on, particularly on behalf of women and girls during CSW 69. And this is not, it's a little off topic, but not. During CSW 69, there was an opposition group called CSW Family, and they held a parallel forum in the hotel for 2 days. And some of their members actually came across the street to the NGO CSW forum and confronted attendees. And it was intimidating and it was mean spirited. But we saw that the backlash is real and that these people really do mean to intimidate and to turn back the time for women.
It's sad to hear.
It was sad to experience.
Yes, I can imagine.
Hey, have
Yeah.
you ever seen that before? I mean, I've heard that
No.
they've had parallels before, but
Nothing like that. Well, last year they had a CSW family. That was the first time I had seen it. And they had one day at the Nigeria House, which is the huge mission on 44th and First, and then one day at the hotel. This year they had both days at the hotel, but they never came into the session to be disruptive and to intimidate people. This was the first time for that.
so the downside of free speech, huh?
You're right.
It's
You're
not
right.
hard. It's not easy. It's not easy being a democracy. This free speech thing is really hard for people to grasp.
Yeah, but then we have to help them. And I did that. I helped them to understand that what they did was wrong. And I asked them to leave because, as the host, you can't stand by and let your guest suffer intimidation
Yep.
and bullying.
I've not seen any questions come up in the chat, so you can feel free. Perhaps that was bad we forgot to mention. You can certainly write any questions you have for Pam. So if you've got something, or raise your hand and ask your question. I know, Pam, I went to an End Child Marriage virtual session with Chelsea Clinton. It was
Oh, yes.
I was very impressed, and there were actually I had to replay it a couple times because she said something that just kind of stuck with me, and I had, and of course I wasn't prepared to write anything down. And all of a sudden she was like saying stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to have this. And it was in memory of, or it reminded her of Coretta Scott King talking about how you're always in continual action, which I think we understand with Zonta being 100 years old, the UN being around since 1940, 6, you really realize that you're always in continual action, and you might make, no wins for a long time, and then you get a win, and then no wins. And you kind of always have to be in that continual action mode. And she said something, and I wrote this down because it just made me realize how much this is true in our Zonta world and in our UN world. We advance whenever possible, you protect where we can, and we defend when we must. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I've got to write
It is
that
brilliant.
down. So, and it was really a great, I couldn't get there this year physically, but boy, even virtually, the sessions I went to were so interesting and well done. And the speakers so well, so everything well spoken and just really to the issues. It was pretty amazing.
Right. Gail,
Yeah.
it's Cheryl. I have a question for Pam. The question is, she saw pushback, and it sounds like it was mostly coming from the US, and of course, everything that the US has done with respect to the UN. Do you see this pushback coming from other member countries with respect to dissolving the actions, the progress that women have made?
It's interesting that the players that came into the church center were one of the women who was there is from the MENA region, from Lebanon. And she told me that the player, the two of the men, were French Canadian. And I asked her, how does she know? She told me, because when you have lived under oppression, you have to know the accents of the oppressor so you know what you're dealing with. And as a Lebanese person, she could recognize that they were French Canadian. So the Heritage Foundation and the CSWF is not comprised simply of Americans. It is comprised by like-minded people from whatever country they may live. Yeah. And I think Terry has a question. Was there much discussion on CSW on climate change? Yes. On any of the major conflicts? Yes, yes, and yes. There are people who are in the community from Gaza, and they are vocal and intelligent and strategic, from Sudan as well. In fact, at the UN, it's not unusual on any day of the week to see a person protesting with a sign from Sudan. And I was on the president of the General Assembly's Gender Advisory Board, and he made a trip to West Sudan, and Ethiopia. And he said that the situation in West Sudan, the humanitarian situation in West Sudan, was the worst that he had ever seen in his life. And people in West Sudan need things like plastic sheets so that they can put them on the road so that when it rains, they're not walking in filth. So, very simple things. Gaza, yes. And the Ukraine, yes. In fact, there are Ukrainian women who participated in our artisan fair, and they had handcrafts from Ukraine that they sold. I see another question. How do we as private citizens protest against our media who are bowing to the current president's wishes of suppressing free speech? I think that it's an excellent question. And I think that the response has to come from you. What can you do? What is effective? in your area. Because what I'd like to suggest to people is they look at the global situation, but then act locally. So, what can you do in your area to make a difference? What I do in New York might be very different. It might be much less effective in Michigan. So, what works in Michigan? And that's a question that you have to come together with like minded people and figure out. I know op eds are always interesting and always well received, and they can spread like wildfire. And then my good friend from Governor of District 3, Dorothy Nauer, has a Zonta sponsored an NGO CSW session on gender and climate justice. And she attended an incredible side event about Afghani women. Yeah, and she concurs that there was a lot of talk about the connection between climate crisis and their survival and food access for Afghani women. So there, when you have 750 sessions, you know that you're going to have a lot. And I don't know anyone who attended all 750 sessions.
This was over a period of how many days?
10.
10 days.
Yeah. And then before, we had conversation circles. So Zonta International had conversation circles, and Gail, you enjoyed them.
I love them. They were wonderful. I could see Dorothy, she's nodding her head. I missed several, but the ones I went to were so interesting and really, really got your little brain thinking about how you fit into that picture and listening to other people. So you have this really great global context of, how we all look at those conversation circles, perhaps a little differently, but in the end, all the same. And I thought it was wonderful. I'm so glad I didn't miss that opportunity. And have you guys done that? Have you done conversation circles before?
Not with Zonta. NGO CSW hosts conversation circles, but I thought we should try it with Zonta because
Yeah.
Zontans have lots of attitude and lots of opinions, and it worked. The conversations were so rich. Yeah.
They were, and I'd love to see those again, because that was really, it was a really good way to keep informed and see how our whole Zana world fits together. Because all of these issues are issues that all of us around the world are impacted by, whether it's really just happening here or it's happening in the Sudan. Really, in the end, it impacts all of us, and we are a global world now. That's just the way it is, and so we have to really care about all of those things.
That's right. And for those of you who were not able to participate, we had 12 conversation circles based on the 12 critical areas identified in the Beijing Platform for Action. So we took one critical area per week, and we had a 1 hour conversation where there was no, everyone had the ability to speak. We didn't have any rules about who could speak, who couldn't. It was free speech, and it was spirited in some of the sessions. And I think well done, Dorothy. I think moderated 2 or 3 for us. Yeah.
I agree. I think the conversation circles were so amazing because you can take an issue, but different countries are handling it in different ways. And I learned so much from other Zontians and about what approaches are being used and how civil society can work very effectively with government to advance women in with Zonta participating, but really with civil society and a whole nation's government in partnership with one another. And then sometimes not. Sometimes, as you said, Gail, the same struggles. So, for instance, I think when we were talking about poverty, I think that was the session that aging people that are aging are becoming, are part of the poverty issue in many countries today, including our own. So I guess that makes sense. I just hadn't thought of it as a worldwide global trend.
Yeah, another interesting topic is water. When we think of water in the US, we think of, we have pipes, but then if you speak to someone who lives in, let's say, Ethiopia, water may have a different meaning if they're in the rural part where they have to walk for 2 miles to get water. And then if you speak to someone who lives in Asia Pacific and their island is sinking because of the rise of water, water takes on an entirely different meaning. So what Dorothy said is completely true, that these topics, the context changes based on where the person is from.
Are there any other questions from our audience?
And Gloria Salas, yes, Zonta says now, had a very good session on climate change. And they always do a very good job.
Well, Pam, thank you
I
so
do.
much for this enlightening conversation. Governor, did you have some questions?
Well, I'm throwing out to everybody. So we're going to have we could have a little conversation right now after hearing all of this conversation. Is there an issue, or is there one issue that's facing women and girls that gives you an inspiration or a commitment to support Zonta, the UN, or women and girls in any country? So is there an issue that kind of comes to your mind that says, this is my inspiration? Come on, guys. I know you're in there thinking, somebody's still here. Yeah, don't be shy. This is how I started conversation circles.
So you're saying like a common denominator.
Yeah, or there's one, is there an issue at the top of your priority list that makes you inspired or committed to take action, to be committed to the UN or ZANA?
Well, I think for me, it's education. Whatever we can do to educate women to rise above all of these things, I would say that would be my issue.
Thanks, Cheryl. I knew your voice. Someone else?
I would say I don't know about just one inspiration because every one of them is so significant. But I would say it's kind of in general terms, except for that it covers so many people in so many nations. And that is empowering women out of the very dangerous situations that they're in, abuse, rape, poverty, all those things. And by empowering them to learn new skills. And there are many organizations working on that right now, but I think that's a very important thing that covers very, very many areas in regard to that. Once they're empowered, and also I think what really moves me about that is how they then change their villages in a sense, by educating the women and giving them new skills, and then their children see that, and even their sons see that, and their sons grow up to see that as the women are taking care of their villages, they learn to respect them, and then they want to change the way they are. So I think that's the sort of thing where just always keep it in the action, because you don't always see the win, but those wins do start kind of weaving in there because of that effect.
Good point.
Well, could I add something to that?
Yeah.
And that was such a great point. Zonta International had a international service project in Niger where we worked on child marriage. And the first step was to go into the communities and work with the men and boys in order to establish support, to establish that foundational support, that male allyship. And then they were able to work with the girls to provide education. And when the girls came back, it was well received because we had already done the work to establish a foundation of support with the men and boys in the community. So please, for all of you who are Zontians and who know that we spend a lot of money with our international service projects, please know that they are very strategic, well planned, and that we are taking lessons learned there and bringing it back into bigger society with greater society. And we know now that male allyship is key. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have men working with us hand in hand to make sure that we are able to get gender equality. It should not be a threat to anyone. It should be something that's natural because, as Hillary Clinton said, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights.
Any other questions? Governor, did you?
I had, let's see, I have one more here.
Okay.
And it's kind of set for Zontians, but how can we better use the tools provided us? So what can we do? And we put our collective heads together. What can we do to better use the tools provided to us by Zonta International to help us support our causes and our work with the UN?
Can I say a few things that I'd
Yeah.
like to see? I'd like to see more people take part in the 16-day campaign, the campaign to end violence against women. And I'd really like to see more people attend the Commission on the Status of Women and bring home what they learn at the commission. And it may be in New York next year, and it may not be based on the pushback, but wherever it is, make an effort to go and apply locally what you learned, and then help other people know about the SDGs, about the Sustainable Development Goals, because in other countries, I think we are more likely to find people who, if you say SDG, they know what you're talking about. Here in the US, not so much. And then I would like to see us help people to understand that violence against women is a real issue. It's not something that happens at home. You know, Bobby got mad and hit Mary, but he does that. So, we just don't talk about it. It's a thing. It's not okay that Bobby gets angry and hits Mary. So we have to get out of um, that realm where we think that we can keep secrets about things that happen to women. And I'd really like to see people look at education as a vehicle for us to get beyond where we are right now.
And I see in the chat, there's a movie, and I did see this, but I haven't watched it yet, called Rule Breakers. People are saying that that might be that's a great movie for you to watch. It's about an Afghan, I know it's about an Afghan woman. That's about it. So that might be something you can put on your to-do list. Perhaps you gain some inspiration from that.
Gail, I'd like to just make a comment.
Yeah.
Pamela, what you said was exactly on key, simply because the Zonta organization here in Burbank has a seat at the table with the city's domestic violence task force. And we meet every other month. And I do remember clearly when we were having the rise in domestic violence victims during the pandemic. We were on a Zoom, several agencies were on a Zoom with the police department. And the police department basically said that they had not received any calls. So as far as they were concerned, there was no rise in domestic violence. However, one of the people who was on that call was an executive director to an agency that helps survivors. And she said the police weren't getting any calls because the agencies were getting the calls. Once you get the police involved, then it becomes a matter of where does the victim go? How long can she stay away? Or if they jail the perpetrator, how long will that person be incarcerated, and will he come back even angrier, or she will come back even angrier? So there are a lot of things that we, just because we don't see it in the newspaper all the time, or the police department or some agency doesn't have the statistics, it is happening. And the same director actually said that it is so true that it covers all economic levels, because we would be shocked if we knew some of the people who are asking for support from this agency, because they are pillars in the community. But we never would have thought about it. But she said it hits everyone. And when financial situations, the stock market goes down, people
Right.
get laid off, or whatever happens, the anger, the frustration just starts building. And it's a outlet. If you have a child or a pet or a spouse or a partner, they're usually the person that they take it out on. But I just thought when you said that, I thought that we're working very closely with this agency here in the city, trying to make it public so people understand. We have little cards that we give out in different languages, the languages that are spoken here in our community, letting them know where the resources are. And we just give them away wherever we are. We all carry a few on hand so that we can provide some type of resource to these victims.
Gloria, thank you so much. It is so good to see you. I'm still excited that you are bringing Cities for CEDAW to Burbank.
Oh.
And that is something that everyone needs to be aware of, that you really made my day when you told me that. And so we have to talk about that more.
Yes.
But in the chat, I just put in a link for a Safe City app, and you can get it from the Apple Store or from the Android store. But it is an app that was developed by the Red Dot Foundation in India, but it gives victims the opportunity to chart their abuse, whether it's on the street and you have a cat call, whether someone tried to abduct you at the mall. You're able to go into this Safe City map and actually make a report. The police can then use the data in order to decide if they want to increase patrols on Broad and Market Street, because they know that that's a hotspot, or they can look for funding for a grant because they have evidence that there is X amount of crimes against women happening at a certain area just based on the data from this app. So I really suggest that everyone, regardless to where you live, Safe City app is now used all around the globe, in South America, Europe, Asia, etc. And it is just amazing.
Thank you for sharing that, Pamela.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, we're about at the end of our time. And Samantha, would you show our next slide? the slide about membership. I encourage the audience to sign up for membership in both Zonta and the United Nations Association USA. GLUNA membership is available for individuals living in the Lansing area. Individuals living outside of the Lansing area can sign up for the United Nations Association membership on unausa.org. There are over 270 chapters in the United States. In Michigan, there are 2 community chapters, one in Lansing, one in Detroit, and 4 university chapters with whom you can collaborate if you are not a student. And those chapters are MSU, U of M, Central, and Northern universities. And then Zonta International, of course, you can, if you're in the Michigan and part of Canada, you can sign up for membership with zonta15.org. And if you know of people who are outside of that area, they can go to zonta.org, the international site, and sign up, showing their interest in membership. Next slide. We've talked about many times during this session about the importance of the UN, what it does for humanitarian efforts, for education, for women's rights, etc. You know, a whole long list of things that the UN and its various agencies are accomplishing. And in order to do that, they of course need to have the money to pay for that kind of work. And that's certainly in jeopardy right now. And one of the biggest contributors is the United States. We are not meeting our commitment for the amount of money that we said that we would give to the UN. And that affects, again, how the UN operates and the various agencies and being able to help to make this a better world. So I suggest that you advocate for supporting the UN, as Pamela has said also. Contact your representatives, your senators, let them know that it's important to contact or to support funding that we had committed to as a country of the United Nations. Next slide. Next slide, Samantha. Support Zonta. I happen to also be a member of Zonta as well as GLUNA, and have been for many, many years, over 26 years. And I know that Zonta accomplishes a great deal and continues to do so every year. Our speaker today has outlined, you know, the importance of our work with the United Nations. And we also have many service projects at the international level. Oftentimes we pair up with a UN agency and give them funding so that they can work on things such as educating young girls in other countries or ending child marriage, etc. So please support Zonta International Foundation for Women, and that will help for funding some of these efforts. Gail or Pam, did you have any last words?
I think just to thank Pam for coming, for you inviting District 15 to help host. And I'm hoping that this connected you more to Zonta if you're a Zontian. If not, I'm glad it introduced you to Zonta and the UN, both important things here in our communities, really.
I'd like to thank you for your hospitality and for your interest. And please, stay in touch. And if you think of something that you think that we should explore, please let me know. And please look at Cities for CEDAW, bringing that to your community, because we are trying to spread it like wildfire. The United States has not ratified CEDAW, the convention to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women, but we're bringing it into our communities. And in Toledo, Ohio, Zonchins brought Cities for CEDAW. And in Burbank, Gloria Salas and Zonta are going to bring Cities for CEDAW. So, but thank you all. I don't want to chatter on for the rest of the evening, but thank you.
And sorry to the audience, my video was not working, but at least you could hear my voice. And again, Pamela, thank you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Have a good evening, everyone.
Alrighty, thank you.
Bye.